Hello friends, welcome back to the channel Demystify Frontend, and this is yet another video in the series Build Your Own Angular Forms, where we are creating Angular form package from the scratch. So on your screen, as you can see, this is the complete picture of the form validation process which we discussed in the last few videos, and we discussed different parts of the validation process and how these connect with each other to make the validation process possible. So in the last video we also implemented the form control class, the abstract control class, and we also unit tested the form control implementation. And in this video we will be covering the remaining parts of the form validation process. This is our use case component where we try all our validation scenarios. So let's start with this input, with this simple input, and the simplest validation which we can start with is the required validation. So let's say we want to make this field as required. Okay, so if I make it empty, then we should get some error. We should highlight the user with the red borders or some error message down below this input. So first I will show you the simplest possible solution which we can have in our ngModel implementation to support the validation, right? And the simplest thing which we can do is simply accept an input property by the name, let's say required, right? And let's say you can pass anything, string, boolean, anything to this, right? And what we can do, we can go to the app component. This is the first name input, as you saw here, the first name. And what we can do, we can simply pass the required attribute, and let's say we pass it true. Okay, so in the ngModel we can simply capture what is passed in this required input property, and based on that we can formulate a validator function, and we can simply set it on the form control. If you have not watched the previous videos where we discussed the how the form control is implemented behind the scenes, how it works behind the scenes, so you should definitely go and check out. Okay, but still let me show you. So this is the form control, and it extend one abstract control class. So this is our abstract control where we have put up all the key things regarding the validation process. It accept a validator function through this method set validator. When we update the control value, what it will do, it will basically call this method update value in validity, which will update the errors and the status for that form control. Okay, so this is all we have to do now. When you apply the ngModel directive on a form element, so what it does, it creates the instance of form control behind the scenes, right? So we will do the same. So we are creating the instance of form control. Now ngModel will basically make use of this form control instance to track the value and validity, and it will expose the those values and validity status flags through itself, right? And we can simply export the ngModel in our templates, and we can get access to all the all the key information we get through this form control, value, status, errors, everything, right? Let's do it step by step. Okay, so once you have created the form control, now the next thing we have to do is, so let's go to this ng on change where we have if block. So this block basically runs only once when your ngModel is set up. So we do some initial setup here within this if block. Like you see in the last few videos, we set up a view change pipeline which through which ngModel gets updates from the host elements where you apply the ngModel. So similarly we will be doing some things here. So what we will do, we will set up the form control, right? So let's define one method, set up form control. So what it does basically, so what it will do, it will basically set up the validator function based on like if we have passed the required input property or not. So first we check if required property is passed, then what we'll have to do, we will have to create a validator function. Let's create a validator function. Okay, and what will be the type of this? So it will be of type something validator function, right? And so basically it accepts a control of type abstract control, and it returns either the validation errors or null, right? depending on the like form control value. If the value is valid, it will return null, and if the value is invalid, then it will return the validation errors. So what validation we have to place here? Simply, if the control value is non-empty, is not empty, then we can simply return null. Else we have to return some error, right? So error shape is something like key value pair, right? So we can simply say required true, right? So this is our this is our validation function, and we will have to set it on the control. So the form control provides one method to set the validation, that is set validator, right? So simply set the validation, and we are doing it only when we have this required attribute passed. And the next thing we will have to do is simply call this, and let's define one more method, like we will also have to update, keep the value updated on the form control, right? So for that, what we will have to do, so let's define one more method. Let's say update value, which accept value of type any, and which will simply set the value on the control, and there is a method for that, set value. Only when you set only when you update the value on the control, then it will run this validator function which we set up initially at the initial setup through this setup form control, right? And when it runs the validation, it will update the flags, status flags and the error flags, which you can make use of in your templates to show or hide the errors, right? So set value accept the value which we want to set, so pass it. And the next thing, so there is one this line which you can just extract from the engine changes, and we can place it here. What it does, it simply call the injected control value accessor. So if you have not checked out my initial videos where we deep dived into the concept of control value accessor, I recommend you go and check out. Okay, so this is how it will work. And now simply what we will have to do, whenever there is a change in the input, okay, so whenever we are passing the properties from the component to the ngModel, either the value or this required attribute, right? So we should update our form control accordingly, okay? And the value is captured here in this dot model. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is go to the setup view change pipeline. Here we are registering for the changes, okay, coming from the host element. So we register for the changes on the injected control value accessor directive, so which will basically let us know about the updates user making in the host elements. So basically within this callback we will have to update our form control as well. So form control should be in sync always, right? Whether we are passing data from the component or user making changes in the host element where you applied your ngModel directive. So since we have set up our form control, and also we set up validation on the form control, now we need to show, right? If there are any errors, we need to show that to the user. So for that, what we will have to do, now as you know, this form control is internal to the ngModel directive, right? This form control, so we create it, but it is directly coupled to this ngModel instance, right? So how do I access it in the template? So Angular basically provides a mechanism through which you can export any directive, right, into a variable, and you can use it within the template. For that, the directive must be configured with this export as flag, right? So first thing we will have to do is simply export the ngModel into a into variable. Let's name it for fname control, okay? So now I'll just add the class based on whether our form control, our um, our form control instance is like valid or invalid, okay? So for that, I should have access to the form control status key, right? So if you see in the abstract control, it has a following keys: value, status and error. So I need to access these, right, in my template. And who will provide it? ngModel, of course. It will expose. So ngModel must be exposing those form control flags, right, through the ngModel instance. Okay, so first thing we have to do is like we have to expose the required flags which we need in the template to make the assertion whether the input is valid or invalid. So let's define quickly some getter functions. Okay, similarly I should expose the errors from the form control, and it will return either the validation errors or null, right? If your input is valid, then of course it will return null. And again I'll have to read the error flag on the form control. Okay, now go back to the app component and you can simply make this assertion based on these flags. So I'll attach the error class if fname control. Okay, sorry, so you have to prefix it with hash, only then it will be treated as a variable, template variable. Okay, so I can read if it is invalid. Okay, so if it is invalid, then attach this error class. Okay, so let's check if it is working fine. Okay, if I make it empty, then you can see this error class is added on the input and you can see the borders are highlighted, right? Let me give it let's say 2 pixel, it will be clear. Okay, let it refresh, remove. Yeah, you can see the validation is working fine. Also let's show the error message as well. So we can simply show it on this. Let's give it a class error and then we just simply, okay, and we show it only when there is when there is a required error. So just place a condition here. All right, so let's check. Clear. Okay, you can see please provide the first name. So yeah, so validation is working fine, right? And suppose if I need to make another field as required as well, so all we have to do is simply we will have to export the ngModel again for that particular input, and let's say this is L name, so I'll just rename it as L name, and then again I'll have to add this class based on the what we have, what we are getting, what status we are getting from the ngModel instance for this particular input. Okay, and again I'll have to append the span, and in the span I'll read the status from the lname control, right? And I can just rename the validation message. Okay, so if this is, yeah, and if I clear it again. Okay, and one thing, so you will have to add this required validation as well, right? Yeah, so now you can check. Yeah, so please provide the last name, right? So it is working fine. So this is just a new approach. This was a basic approach to start with, but I'll tell you in the next video, like there are so many issues, and uh, uh, the way we have implemented the validation today, it's not going to scale very well, right?